Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to welcome you to the Global Water Futures and UNESCO Cold Regions Warming Art and Science exhibit and discussion. This is a unique approach to fusing art and science together to communicate the very difficult topic of the impacts of climate change on our water and our cryospheric system. And this is something very much in our hearts in Canada and around the world in other cold regions countries where snow and ice play a major role. My name is John Pomeroy. I'm director of the Global Water Futures program based in Canada, and I would wish to introduce our opening speakers. We're delighted to have as our opener Pam Pearson, the executive director of the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, who is hosting this lovely Cryosphere Pavilion. Pam, please come up and say a few words. Thank you.
Good evening. We are delighted to be hosting this event, this cultural event at the end of the day. It's been a busy day during the high-level segment here at the Cryosphere Pavilion, but every evening during the entire COP, we're having what we're calling Cryosphere Cèlidhes. A Cèlidh in the Scottish and Irish Celtic tradition is a way to highlight different singers, different instrumentalists, and we are expanding this to the artistic world. And a Cèlidh normally is when you have a number of different singers, players, artists, all going one after another for a very long evening. Because of COVID, of course, we cannot do that in the same way. We can't have an open mic. We can't have dancing. So we're doing a Cèlidh that spreads across the entirety of the COP every evening at 7:30 in the pavilion. Will be a portion of that Cèlidh. And we're delighted that this can kick off the Cryosphere Cèlidhes. And with that, I will turn it over then back to you, John, yes, to talk about global water futures and the origins of this wonderful exhibit that we're so happy to, in a sense, be hosting tonight. And you can talk about its location right now, which has been enjoyed already all afternoon. It's been really fun watching people react to the paintings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pam, for those warm words on a cold regions warming evening. Our next speaker, I would like to introduce the co-sponsor of this program from the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organization. This is Dr. Shamila Narbadul, who is Director General for Natural Sciences and a great supporter of the science of water and climate and the fusion of this with art. Please.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, experts, excellencies, thank you for being with us here today. This is an important event in history. Never ever before has the cryosphere and mountain glaciers been so important in our lives as it is today. From source to sea, we need to measure the impacts of climate change. How better then through the eyes of not only science, but an artist to capture the science perspective of our melting glaciers and our disappearing cryosphere. How can we as humanity afford to let this particular heritage of mankind, of humanity, disappear under our eyes if we do not take action here today? UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, is really delighted to join up here with you today in this innovative exhibition on perspectives of the glaciers through the eyes of an artist. I would like to thank, first of all, the team, which is led by Professor John Pomeroy from the University of Saskatchewan. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And I'd like to thank the Government of Canada and especially future waters. Thank you very much. I want to thank Professor Trevor Davis from the University of East Anglia. Thank you for being with us here today. You've been a strong supporter. And I want to sincerely thank also Ms. Pamela. Thank you for all your support from the initiative of Cryospheres. But dear participants, your excellencies, none of this would have been possible at all without the perspective of an exceptional artist, Mr. Gennadiy Ivanov. He's the artist in residence as Global Water Futures. He's the artist with the synthetic thinking and a technical style that is able to capture the science behind the glaciers. So thank you very much for being with us here today. UNESCO greatly appreciates the efforts of the Global Water Futures and also the support from all the member states of UNESCO, and especially the countries which are most affected by the glacial outbursts and the glacial melting and the glacial disappearance. So I'd like to pay special honor to His Excellency Minister from Tajikistan, who is here with us here today. Thank you for being with us, sir. And I also would like to thank His Excellency Sultan Razimedov, who is also with us, honoring us here today. These are the countries which are really at the forefront of mountainous people combating the impacts of climate change on their populations as well as downstream. Now, the cold regions warming is really critical to our survival. We always talk about sea level rise, but we never look at the source to see. We never look at this heritage of humanity, which is the cryospheres. So thank you so much to our artists for bringing us here together today. I also want to say that there is a need for worldwide inventory of the existing perennial ice and snow masses, which was first considered by the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program in 1965. It is time here today to revisit this new paradigm of looking at the glaciers as well as our ice sheets and this cryosphere, which is a heritage of humanity. So we look forward to working with you to help to inspire younger generations to valorize and to value this cryosphere, which is our heritage. We would like to be inspired by the global water futures, science, and portrayal of the devastating impact of climate change warming at research sites across the world. And the art that you will see today comprises pastels, which is painted in the field. It's actually very capturing with sound, music, and it portrays images of our feelings. The aim is to inspire and to motivate current generations and future generations to value our cryosphere. But it's also an initiative of awareness raising, an initiative of the cry of the glaciers. We need to act now. We need to put a face to science, and we need to ensure that we protect the glaciers for current and future generations. We need to protect our cryosphere. How better than to do it through the action and the words of an artist? I recall growing up under the apartheid years of South Africa, when Nelson Mandela first created a ministry for science and technology in South Africa. The ministry was called Ministry for Arts, Science and Technology. Many years later, we all began to appreciate the artistic expressions of science today. And how better than to honor our artist who is here with us today, Mr. Gennadiy Ivanov. Thank you for bringing a face to the glaciers through the artistic expressions and expressing science through your art. Thank you very much, and wishing you good deliberations and looking forward to this exhibition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those kind and visionary words, Dr. Nair Budul. It's my pleasure now to introduce a great dear colleague, Professor Trevor Davies of the University of East Anglia. Professor Davies is no mean snow and ice scientist himself, having studied the snow and ice caps from the high mountains of Africa to Norway to Arctic Canada to Scotland itself, and deduced some of the horrific problems of acid precipitation and chemical deposition in snow and ice over the years. He has also served as a very important role as director of the Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, where climate change was first enunciated in a clear way and documented, and as Dean of the School of Environmental Sciences, and finally as Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of East Anglia, and then its branch in China. And so I, with great pleasure, introduce Professor Davies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Excellencies, everyone, hello. Transitions Art Science Project within Global Water Futures, directed by John Pomeroy. When Gennadiy Ivanov first approached me and then I contacted John Pomeroy very quickly, we were struck and impressed by the way in which he represented some of the impacts of climate change on lowland eastern England. We thought that his style, his impressionistic styles, would suit the representation of the rather more dramatic impacts of climate change in cold regions and in high mountains. So, courtesy of John Pomeroy, here is Gennadiy Ivanov on the St. Elias ice field in Yukon. He works exceptionally quickly in the field, sometimes under very difficult conditions, very low temperatures, blizzards. Here, atypical conditions, rather luxurious, rather warm, clear skies. But there is an example of one of his paintings, his field paintings, pastels, which he produces in 15 or 20 minutes. He then uses these field pastels, and here is another example. This is an example of thawing permafrost, Caribou Creek, Northwest Territory in Canada, where a south-facing bank of a creek has collapsed because of permafrost thawing. Mud is oozing out of the bottom of the bank, and Gennadiy Ivanov, demonstrating his innovative approach to these field paintings, actually utilized the oozing mud from the bottom of this collapsing bank into this particular pastel. He then takes those field pastels together with his photographs, his memories, his sound recordings, and discussions with John Pomeroy and myself, and in the studio produces large works of oil paintings. This one is entitled Impermanent Frost, and it shows here permafrost, which is very ice rich, very water rich. So as the water melts, then water cascades out of the bank. You actually see these cascading waterfalls from the thawing permafrost. The trees which have been rooted in the soil, which is bound to the permafrost, as the permafrost thaws, these start to move and collapse and die. And there you see Gennadiy's representation of drunken and dying trees resulting from thawing permafrost. Here is an impressionistic example of his painting. It's called The Sorcerer's Snowscape because he left wet paint to run overnight in the top half of the painting, and this produced textures very redolent of the sort of snowscapes that we saw in Northwest Territories and the Yukon. The lower part of the painting are trees, small copses of trees, which with warming climate are moving gradually northwards and to higher elevations. He also has an allegorical style, which we find it very useful and helpful when we're trying to explain some of the science and some of the challenges which science faces. This is entitled The Denier and the Bear. There are still people who deny the observations, who deny the science. The observations here represented by one of Global Water Futures automated masts in cold regions in Canada. The deniers invert logic, turn logic upside down, turn rationality upside down to the extent that they even turn themselves upside down. There's a polar bear, iconic to many people, of the species which are vulnerable to the changing climate. Here the polar bear has supplemented his weapons, his already existing impressive weaponry, because he needs all the help that he can have in fighting the deniers and also rising to the challenge of climate change. Now, these paintings with their accompanying science captions have been enthusiastically received by scientists, by artists, by visitors to exhibitions. We found they're also inspiring and motivating members of the public. Out of scores of unsolicited written comments made in the exhibitions in Canada and the UK, is one which I think captures in some ways what is a typical reaction. So this is a written comment. I know nothing about art, if I'm honest. I found this to be utterly moving and heartbreaking, a real mixture of beauty and pain, incredible. And the person who wrote that got in touch with us, got in touch with Gennadiy Ivanov, got in touch with the scientist, learned more about the science, and asked, what can I do? What can I do as a member of public to help rise to this challenge? I would like to hand over, great pleasure, to Gennadiy to talk about his art himself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll briefly introduce Gennadiy Ivanov. Gennadiy Ivanov was born in the Soviet Union, traveled throughout that territory, understanding the cold regions of the east and the west of the Soviet Union's vast landscape. Later, living in Belarus, he immigrated to England and is now based in the city of Norwich, where he runs the Norwich Art Studios Gallery and is an exceptional painter who started with his interest in climate change with the Norfolk sea level rise and collapsing cliffs, and then through his brave travels to the wilds of Canada, to the far north, to the far west, exploring the thawing and melting landscapes on the forefront of cold regions. Gennadiy, thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for introducing me. So my name is Gennadiy Ivanov. I'm artist in residence in University of Saskatchewan, working with the Global Water Futures program in Canada. Well, I'm from UK, as I said, from Norfolk, originally Russian, from Belarus. It's a very interesting combination. I can say what my art matters. I have many paintings, some of which is really difficult to look at. However, when the truth hurts, it's more important to portray it. In my point of view, the art can be catalyst for change. Art and artists can play an important role in raising awareness, drawing in new audience and participants, and helping inspire action. So that even in this late stage, we can avoid some of the very worst consequences of human-induced climate change. This is why I try to make my art matter. So that is not only tells the truth, but helps motivate change. In 2017, I painted scenes of Norfolk coastline in the knowledge what coastal erosion is a huge challenge for the country, worsened by rising sea level resulting from climate change. I have been I have seen houses fall into the sea and farmland lost. It affected me greatly. It was very emotional for me because I am migrant and I left my home for good to be an artist. But some people losing their homes for nothing. It's really terrible to see. I have seen bricks on a sea. It's terrible. This experience led me to meet fantastic Canadian British scientists, Professor John Pomeroy, director of the Global Water Futures program, and Professor Trevor Davis, former director of the Climatic Research Union of the University of East Anglia. And we organized Canadian art science expeditions. And what I have seen devastated me. The Canadian cold regions are being hugely impacted by climate change. I know the same things happen in Russia, in the north, in central Russia. Record high temperatures, permafrost thaw, and more rapid glaciers, snow melt are occurring in both countries. Mountain areas across the world are suffering. As a result, the paintings I have made during these years have invoked the strongest emotional links to of any art I ever produced. It's because climate change is a shocking change in our nature. One big tragedy and drama for many countries and nations. Many people facing it right now. These these exhibitions have reawakened my memories of snow, cold. As a child in Russia, and I seem even more precious to me. Now what I understand the profound changes what humans are making our environment and how little we seem to want to do about it. When I was a kid, I remember lots of snow in Russia and Belarus, but every year there were fewer and fewer days to enjoy the purity of the great crystal of snow, which are actually water, and water is our life. I'm particularly emotionally attached to the decline of the Pater Glacier in Alberta. It's one of the world's longest studied glacier, and it's rapidly receding. I have visited this remote glacier twice under very different weather conditions. The first time was cold, cloudy, and windy. The second time it was total contrast, brilliant blue summer day. My paintings from that day was amongst the most colorful I have ever produced of the glacier. I have done a few field sketches from different positions and views, tried to hide behind the rocks from the wind, or just sit in the ice on my knee and hold the paper on my rucksack. The first time it was -10, second time it was about just above +10, and I was drawing very fast pastels, only 5 minutes per sketch, trying to show my emotional feelings of this particular time and day. I will never forget this beauty of the glacier and experience. Now, it's facing the final death, decay, and darkness. Thank you for listening. Thank you. I have exhibition just behind this area, so please visit it. And I think John say, please more.
Thank you so much, Gennadiy. So now we will move into a part of the discussion where we try to fuse science and art in a unique and different manner. So bear with me, I'll present you a graph, but I promise to present you with a stunning painting right after the graph and along with it as possible. This is our reality right now. We have an average warming of 1.5 to 4.9 degrees Celsius in high latitudes since 1960. We're not worried about 1.5 degrees warming in the high latitudes anymore. That was quite a while ago. We're well past this. Northern North America, Canada, Northern Europe, and Asia are warming at twice the global average. The circumpolar north is warming at 3 times the global average. And as you go further north, it warms faster. That is a massive problem for the Earth. And our future climate projections in Canada under stabilization of greenhouse gases by 2100, looking maybe a little less likely after today, or ineffective greenhouse gas controls, which is the path we're on, suggests that at high latitudes, we could see warming of 9 to 10 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels by the end of the 21st century. This is an unimaginable world we can see of drought and fire. And yes, that is a photograph. These are photographs from northern Canada in the last 5 years. So we're already starting to see scenes that you'd not associate with the subarctic and Arctic regions. This is the future we fear. So cold regions warming, this canvas starts to capture this warming, the heating of the north of the circumpolar world, and the thawing of the permafrost, the decline of the sea ice, the demise of the Greenland ice sheets and other high ice sheets. When we look at future climate projections for precipitation in northern Canada, it's also getting wetter. And you can say, oh, that will be fine. A little bit warmer, a little bit wetter. That sounds lovely. It's not lovely. Not when you get this sort of flooding occurring across the prairies or the city of Calgary, Alberta, occurring as a result of this. And flooding is very much what northern Canada is seen. As snow and ice disappear, we see more rainfall and more intense rainfall and rain on snow events and contributions from rapid ice melt to that flooding as that glacial pulse of water moves through the system. And you can see 40 to 50% increases in precipitation in far northern Canada under the most extreme scenarios. So here's another painting from Gennadiy to remind us of this combination of warming and wetting in the far north. Permafrost thawing reunites distant cousins, and we see some rather scary things coming out of the ice, meeting our threatened polar bear here as the permafrost thaws and this new strange world comes in. And we have to remember that in Siberia, they've been finding anthrax coming out of the ice. So there's some very nasty things as well coming available now. So in Canada, 2021 wasn't a very good year. We had record daily highs exceed the previous records for the country by 5 degrees Celsius. These are some areas in far northern Canada we see here hitting 30, 34 degrees. These are all new record highs set on June 29th, 2021. We've had lakes collapse and drain because of permafrost thawing, flooding in London, Ontario, flooding in Port Stanley, Ontario, exceptional drought across the Canadian prairies, fruit crops scorched by the heat in British Columbia, the town of Lytton, BC, hitting a new Canadian record high of 49.6 degrees on July 1st and burning to the ground the next day. The decline of Peyto Glacier has accelerated tenfold in terms of its retreat. That's our longest index glacier in the Rockies. And the melt of the northern ice sheets and glaciers in northern British Columbia and southern Yukon caused a summer of perpetual flooding in Whitehorse, Yukon, as a record snowpack in the massive Llewellyn Glacier melted away and caused extreme problems for the Yukon Territory. So that's been our summer. The Global Water Futures Program was established in 2016 in response to anticipation of this, with goals to deliver risk management solutions informed by leading-edge water science to manage water futures in Canada and other cold regions where global warming is changing the environment. And it's led by the University of Saskatchewan with a partnership of the University of Waterloo, McMaster and Laurier University, and 14 others across the country, funded by the Canada First Research Excellence Fund from the Government of Canada. So it's become a large program. Our mission is to improve disaster warning with water-based disasters associated with climate change, floods, droughts, water quality episodes, predict the future waters on the decadal and century perspective, and inform society's needs to adapt to change and manage the risks through here. And you see more of Gennadiy's paintings showing up now, along with the natural disasters of flooding that we see. The Global Water Futures team right now has over 900 publications in the scientific literature. We've hired over 1,100 researchers across Canada, funded over 200 professors at 18 universities, work with 465 partners across Canada, and tied into a number of global programs. So we're very proud of the size and scope of this program. It's the most cited water research program in the world. Here's Peyto Glacier. We've talked a lot about Peyto Glacier again. It's my old friend. And there it is, a photograph I took a few years ago, and a painting Gennadiy has produced of it more recently. Remember, it ties into WMO's Cryosphere Watch, UNESCO's International Hydrological Decade, and is a great science generator to help us understand glaciers throughout the world, including Central Asia, South America, Europe. It's melting away rather rapidly, about 25 meters in 5 years there. Gennadiy's paintings of the crevasses and the decline of the glacier, the spread of algae on its surface, which is darkening this and feeding on the soot from the forest fires, is quite provocative. The future water from Peyto Glacier is not looking very good, despite a wetting of the mountains and increasing precipitation. By the end of the century, we forecast a drop in runoff as the glacier coverage drops to about 3% of this catchment. This becomes a terrible deglaciated future and a much drier, more variable future for this high mountain headwater. Here's a painting to represent that terrible present and wretched future that we see for Peyto Glacier. So a very strong, emotionally impactful painting from Gennadiy. So we're seeing the emergence of a strange new landscape. And here's another painting of his entitled this, showing the proglacial ice core moraine forming down with small glacial lakes downstream of the former ice locations. Another research site in the Canadian Rockies going back to the early 1960s is Marmot Creek Research Basin, also established under the International Hydrological Decade of UNESCO. And this is more of a typical montane, snow-covered mountain headwaters, subject to forestry experiments in the past. They tried clear cutting to increase the snowpack, increase the stream flow. Didn't work. But it's, again, a great scientific laboratory. And when we look at future Marmot Creek stream flow, snowpack, we see a massive decline, particularly in some of the clear cuts and at the low elevations, less in the high alpine area, but a severe threat to the future snowpack of Marmot Creek. In this case, we see a 45-day advance in the timing of the spring freshet, which will create massive problems for the downstream irrigation in the farmlands of southern Alberta and Saskatchewan. And but because of the increase in precipitation, an overall increase in stream flow discharge, despite the loss of snowpack. The hydrological regime is decoupling from the snowfall regime in this particular case. And here's a painting after a short winter to show that sort of sequence of that earlier freshet through the season and what we have to adapt to. Wildfires are another thing we have to adapt to. The shorter snow season means a longer wildfire season. And wildfires in Alberta now start in April rather than May. And this is something we have to deal with. We had the most extensive wildfire season in Canadian history in 2021, associated with the heat wave and the rapid snowmelt and the boreal forest burning. His mountain tinderbox and ashes shows this very nicely. And it's creating tremendous ecological damage to the wildlands of Canada. Ice to water too soon. This is the Yukon River at Five Fingers Rapids, and showing it already flowing in mid-April in 2019. This was the second earliest breakup on record on the Yukon River, and this is well measured because they've been gambling on the timing of this breakup in Dawson City since the days of the Klondike Gold Rush in 1896. So it's very well measured. Solutions. What can we do about this? We have to do something. One, for Canada, a country with vast amounts of fresh water, we have very fragmented water management. We need to create and mobilize the knowledge together in this, and we propose and have been discussing a Canada Water Agency as a way forward for Canada to deal with the impacts of climate change, which are really the impacts on the water cycle and the water system. We need to strengthen our transboundary management between provinces and with the United States. We need to better predict floods and droughts. We need to coordinate and collect our water research, all water research and water data in one areas. We have to reconcile with Indigenous people and make sure they're at the table making decisions about how we manage this water in the future, and that their knowledge and understanding is brought forward. They look 7 generations to the future for water, and that's a very, very good guide. And improve collaborative river basin planning and management. partnerships, river restoration, looking at environmental flow regimes, soil and water conservation, so many things. We have a water crisis now. We need a Canada Water Agency now in Saskatchewan. And just a list of a few things it could do: expanding flood and drought predictions, put together a comprehensive water data system, updating transboundary agreements, developing a prairie and a Great Lakes water strategy, and coordinating national water research. That's probably not just a good description of what Canada needs. That could be a good description of what every country needs as we start to face these stresses on our water system. And so we also hope this Canada Water Agency can have a vast international role in taking its understanding and coming out to other countries around the world to help them manage their fresh water. So some of the environmental predictions that we're developing in Global Water Futures include a hyper-resolution snow and glacier and hydrological model. This one scaling down to 50 meters resolution. And also the fear that our observations could be overtaken. And the chief of the Vunkut-Gwitchin band in northern Yukon, Northwest Territories, described climate change and its impact on the Gwich'in people as a nuclear explosion in slow motion. As their permafrost goes, the caribou migrations go, the fish are not in the right place, and their communities collapse into the rivers and are flooded. And so here's Gennadiy's representation of that, one of our research sites. So failure here means everything. It means freshwater insecurity for the planet. And remember, no water, no life. That's how high the stakes are. We can still choose our water futures. We could still do this, and we have some time to go here. So let's make sure we make the right choices. And I'm optimistic that we know how to do that. So I want to thank you and encourage everyone to walk across the hallway here and visit some of the art which is put up, and you can tour it in person at your leisure. And thank you so much for listening to us today.